All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina, and I'm the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And I'm so glad you can join us this morning for this MEFA Institute webinar on helping students and parents approach the college choice process systematically. And we are so fortunate to have two really wonderful presenters this morning. We have Dr. Amanda Sterk, who Yes, who works for Method Learning, and she is their college and career advising person, working with students and families. And we have Dr. Timothy Poynton, who is professor at UMass Boston, and both are experienced educators with a passion for bringing tools and strategies to school counselors. And I think what they share with you today, you're going to be able to take a lot of it and go back to your offices and begin using some of these tools and strategies. So this is great. I just also wanted to say that continue to come back to MEFA and check out the offerings in the MEFA Institute. We have trainings on all kinds of topics, and you can receive professional development points for attending. So you'll have the chance to send that in to us, and we'll send you a certificate. So please continue to be in touch with MEFA. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our expert presenters.
Great. Well, let's get started. You and Tim. We are excited to be here. Just a little bit more about us. Myself is Dr. Sterk, Amanda Sterk, and I have been in education for over 20 years. I've been on every side of the coin, everything from K-12 as a school counselor, a college counselor, private consulting. And one of the things that I found as a counselor was really, how do I help my students go through the process? And I was actually in a early college system where half my students weren't even on our campus. And so what I realized is there really wasn't a strong curriculum out there on how to sort of systematically walk my students through the process. And what I found is when students came to me without sort of that process, I kept saying the same thing. I call it the 90-10 rule, right? About 90% of what we do, we say it over and over again, right? They kind of ask generic questions. And in my mind, I'm like, what happens if we flip the script? What happens if we gave the students the 90% that's sort of consistent across the board in the college application process and the financial aid and scholarships? And I could really focus on the 10%. And so when I started introducing this curriculum to my own students, we went from about $500,000 of scholarships to over $10 million worth of scholarships. We actually had our admissions double, the amount of colleges we applied to doubled. And more importantly, I actually reduced some of my workload because instead of having these sort of generic meetings all the time, I really could focus in on the student and really have better conversations. And so as the curriculum grew, I started promoting it. I reached out to Dr. Poynton and Dr. LePan because they are like the gurus of college and career readiness and have extensive amounts of research. And I said, let's build out a curriculum that actually works for schools. And how do we do that? That's evidence-based, research-based, and really can guide all students through the process. And so that's how kind of College Unmazed came about. And we just keep expanding, right? So we have a student workbook that we sell all across the United States. We have a school-based curriculum, we have a parent box, and we have other mini books like a parent guide, a dual enrollment book, and many others. So really exciting what we've been doing, and we definitely appreciate the partnerships like MEFA. So Dr. Poynton, he is amazing. And why don't you just introduce yourself for a minute?
Hi, Tim Poynton. As Julie mentioned, I'm a counselor educator at UMass Boston. Previously worked as a school counselor in New York State before switching my focus to counselor education. But yeah, to give you the short version and what I guess motivates me in this work is so part of the research that I did relatively recently, about 5 or 6 years ago or so, is started doing research on college knowledge, and did a study here, mostly in New England, that focused on measuring students' college knowledge. Developed a quiz, an assessment called the College Admissions Knowledge Evaluation, and what we learned was that when we surveyed graduating high school seniors, they scored about a 50 on the college knowledge test. 50. So students were making decisions about their post-secondary planning and which college to attend in particular, with relatively little information, relatively little fact-based information. So kind of figuring out what I was going to do about that with Rich Lepan is when Amanda contacted us, said, "Hey, I've got this idea, I've got this student workbook that's focused in Florida. We want to go national, so to speak." So it was really good timing for us because I think that's what drives me and motivates me in this work, is trying to find ways to improve students and families' college knowledge. And that's what we do in College Unmazed, is we try to develop tools and resources to facilitate that, and therefore facilitate the work of counselors. The counselors are, and schools are really our primary target audience, if you will. So the workbook and the curriculum that we have, it's really designed for you to use in schools. So Rich Lepan, who's not here, I've been doing research with him probably for about the past 15 or so years. He retired from UMass Amherst about 2 years ago now, but is still actively involved with us in College Unmazed.
So we'll kind of go through the system. Now, we're not going to cover all the information today. We're really going to be covering sort of what we call section 2, which will be the lead strategy. But what we did, as Tim mentioned in College Unmazed, is we really looked at the holistic process and at what point should students learn that critical college knowledge. And so in the first half of the book, we have what we call developing your factors. And there's 4 key factors that we walk families and students through. It's your you factor, what sort of makes you unique. And that could be extracurriculars, it could be sort of your passion things, and how to connect with the community and your school on that. We dive into your academic factor. So looking at your school-based programs, dual enrollment, other outside opportunities to really kind of figure out about rigor and honors courses, and just who you are and how to sort of incorporate that. Next, we talk about your career factor, which is really going into sort of the Hollins codes and looking at your values, your interests, your abilities, and how that all comes together with the world of work, what you know, and then who you are, and really putting those together. And then the last chapter of the first section is we decided to put money and having that conversation with families much earlier in the process. And so the money factor is actually built in very early to know that college is affordable, or post-secondary education is affordable and can definitely be doable. And then again, like I said, today is going to be the primary focus on the second half of the book, which is the lead strategy. So we'll be walking through how to build a college list, how do we walk students through exploring colleges, applying, deciding, and then succeeding, which I know as a counselor, I did really well on the list, explore, and even applying. But the deciding and the succeeding is also really stuff that a lot of times we don't get to, because the end of the year, lots of things are going on. So again, we want to be really intentional of walking students through that entire process. So you will see behind Tim, and he can model the posters. If you're interested in the posters, again, this comes from him and Rich's work on the cake. We really broke down the specific college knowledge of each of the key areas and each of the chapters. And so this is what we call our College Unmazed mind maps, and it walks them through kind of those key vocab and sort of systematically going through that process. If you are interested in these posters, they're 18 by 24. We send them out for free all the time. They're 18 by 24. You can just email me at asterk@collegeunmazed.com with your address and name, and I will be happy to get those into the mail. So these are really pretty. And then you can see, here's the main ones. And then the next one will be the lead strategy. Okay, yeah, so we'll go back to that. And this is the second map, which is the leads map. And then it's very specific, again, that sort of scaffolded approach. And I find when I work with families, it's really easy to kind of point to where we're at in that process, or like, this is where we need to talk about. And so they kind of know exactly where they're at in that process. So let's go back to the lead strategy. So as I said earlier, this is going to be our primary focus that we're going to walk you through today. When we start building lists, I have a lot of students that don't know where to start. It's sort of overwhelming. And when you talk about, over 2,400 four-year post-secondary institutions and over 4,500, 2 and 4 year institutions, we need to narrow that list down to a very manageable number. So we really talk about at what point in that list strategy do we actually look at different factors or different what we call the 6 keys of college fit. And then we really walk students through the explore aspects, where how do you actually engage with the college, and what is some of the data and information that you need to know, both on a website, when you do a college visit, when you do a college fair, and being very specific at how you sort of build that informational knowledge so you know if you're choosing a college that works for you. Definitely apply. As we know right now, a lot of the students have finished up their applications, a few stragglers, but definitely just how that process works and how to make that easier to decide. How do you actually funnel that down to the best decision, and then actually developing a plan for success. All right, Tim.
So, thank you, Amanda, for that overview. So just before I get into that, I'll say the lead strategy. I know Amanda and Rich don't like it when I say this, but the lead strategy kind of describes a process that I think most counselors already use to a large extent, right? I think you all kind of routinely help students develop the list, explore the colleges on their list to figure out which ones to apply to, and then help them make a decision on which one is the best for them among those that they were accepted to. But the succeed part and the specific explicit transition planning is the part that I think we as counselors sometimes don't. It's the end of the year. That we could use a little bit of outside help with, perhaps. So I think that's a nice addition to what we have here. But it makes a nice acronym to think of the lead strategy, but it also is meaningful. But let's focus here on in terms of making an informed decision, and it involves seeing kind of the whole picture, right? So here, when you look at this, this is from Gestalt psychology, the figure ground principle, it's called. And most people, when you look at this, you'll see one of two things. You'll either see an ornate vase, right? That's the black part, or you'll see two faces that are looking at each other, right? And that's the white part. And just visually, psychologically, we often can't pay attention to the whole picture and see both of those unless we spend more time looking at it or are told what to look for. And that's really what Amanda mentioned with the 6 keys of college fit. That's what we're trying to help students and families do with what we call the 6 keys of college fit, is really take a look at the whole picture of the college to really evaluate how well the college fits them. Using the six keys of college fits gives students and families the tools to see the whole picture and to really understand the college. I always like to say that choosing a college involves attending to both facts and feelings. And the 6 keys of college fit really provides a nice structure for figuring out and paying attention to the facts and which facts to pay attention to. It helps you pay attention to the ones that were important to you, and also helps perhaps uncover ones that you didn't think of considering, right? So we'll go through these 6 keys through each step of the lead strategy. Like that's basically how it works, is we use the lead strategy to figure out which of the 6 keys of college fit to look at each step of the process. Because the fact is, and I think you'd all agree with this, the fact is that while 20 years ago, I think the problem was that there wasn't enough information for students and families about colleges, but now there's an overwhelming amount of information about colleges available and data available about colleges. It's overwhelming, so then people kind of throw their hands up in information overload, and then they don't use any of it, or don't use very much of it. So that's what we've done with the 6 keys of college fit here, is combining it with the lead strategies, helping you figure out which information to pay attention to at each step of the process. So I'll just go over them quickly here, starting at the top. The academic match kind of describes how you fit academically into the environment. It's where you think a little bit about what do accepted students look like in relation to my academic qualifications, if you will. Things like program size and availability are also part of that. What's the academic environment? The career match really talks about the career placement services and opportunities that are provided there to help you grow and understand career pathways and how that particular college can help you uncover and identify and solidify your plans in the career realm. The financial match, obviously critically important. It's understanding using the information that you learn from the first part of the book and the money factor chapter, but really understanding how financing works and how that particular college that you're looking at matches you in terms of finance. And one of the things, I think you all know this, but a lot of students and families don't know this, is that sometimes it's possible for a private college to be competitive cost-wise with public colleges. And I don't know how many people in my own family have said, oh, we're not looking at any private colleges because they're all too expensive. And while their sticker price is more expensive, their cost of their actual net price is not. I'm going through this. My daughter's actually going through the process right now, and she's gotten some really competitive offers from private schools that, before I started learning about this and doing this kind of work, I might not have even considered those schools, having attended a public university myself for my undergraduate. So that's the financial match. The personal match is the things that a lot of students and families kind of naturally pay attention to. It's things like distance from home, what's the living arrangements, what are the dorms like? Do they have programs for recreation things for me to do? Is the student body diverse? Are people going to look like me on that campus? Things like that are all part of what we call the personal match key. The student outcomes is the data, the hard data on how successful the college is essentially at supporting students, both in their first year through things like the retention rate and through their fourth year or sixth year, as the case may be, their graduation rate, right? One of the things that's alarming to a lot of people is to know that the overall four-year graduation rate across all four-year colleges is in the mid 50%. And that's an improvement. Not long ago, it was in the mid 40%. So lots of students, and these are only looking at students who start as full-time first-time freshmen. A little more than half of them actually graduate in 4 years. You bump that number up to another 10% or so if you look at the 6-year graduation rate. But I don't know about you, but I don't talk with many students and families who start college full-time with a 6-year graduation plan, right? So these student outcomes are critically important to look at and understand. And the last key that we'll talk about is student support. That's things like of all of the support services that are available, and they tend to exist on, they're similar on a lot of college campuses, but some places have specific unique programs. Curry College with their PAL program, I believe it's called, for example. There may be some specific support services that you need that don't exist to the extent that you need them on college campuses. So looking at the student supports that you need that are available in the colleges that you're considering is the last and final key.
And I'll just add in, Tim, I think what I found when we talk to counselors about the 6 keys of college fit is, we've all done it. We're like, oh, what's your fit? And we use it as a very generic term. So this is actually one of the biggest things that counselors really gravitate towards, because it provides you a way to really have these conversations and make sure that students are looking at all the different factors that are important in making that final, both the applied, where do I apply and where do I want to attend? And also, a lot of families, we find parents are maybe focused on the financial match and kids are focused on the personal match. So it just gives a nice point of sort of reference and communication. And when students, I'm always so proud when a student would be like, oh, well, I've checked out the adaptive services because of student support is really important to me. And it's that sense of like pride, like, oh, you're understanding how these pieces start working together. So I think that this is actually one of my favorite infographics, because it's so meaningful. If the students can do this, they're really thinking of college in a much deeper and more informed way.
So we'll go through each step of the lead strategy and describe it a little bit. So in the list phase, the primary objective of this initial phase in developing your initial list of colleges to explore is to identify options that generally fit you without getting overwhelmed and missing good options. So ideally we say, and this is just a rough estimate, 10 to 15 colleges to initially explore is a good number. It's going to depend on things like the specific program that you're looking at and where you live. Like, I know most of us are probably here from Massachusetts today, but did you know that California has 233 four-year colleges? Texas has 129, both big states. Massachusetts, we have 91 in our relatively little state, and Wyoming has 3 for your colleges. So we're replete with options here in Massachusetts. You can get from one side to the other in what, 3.5 hours if you go from the tip of the Cape to the New York border. But in other places, they're not as lucky as we are. So in this initial list phase, you want to make sure that you're kind of casting a wide net and filtering through that to get to the colleges that you're going to explore more deeply, but you don't want to miss any good options, right? So what we're looking at here is we're going to use 3 of the 6 keys of college fit here in this first phase. And we're going to look at things like personal match, distance from home, the location, city, rural, etc. Do they have sports teams that you're interested in if you're an athlete or interested in even intramural athletics, for example? Does the college have a religious affiliation? Is that important to you? And is there a special mission that you're looking for, such as an HBCU or a single-sex college? So that's the aspects of personal match we'll use. We're going to look at career match to ensure that they have programs available that are of interest to you. And then the academic match, we're looking at things like, do you want to do distance learning or live on campus, credit for life experience, the type of degree programs that they have, etc. So an initial kind of cursory look, if you will, to make sure that things fit. And the tool that we recommend folks use, and you can use several tools for this, but the one that we recommend because it's freely available is the College Navigator. I like the College Navigator. Again, you could do this in Naviance, you can do this through the College Board, SCORE, etc. You can do this in lots of different places and using lots of different tools, but we know that the College Navigator is freely available and it's an unbiased source of information. It gets the data in the College Navigator is the same data that all of these other tools use, particularly in this initial list phase. So what you can do is you can put through those aspects of those 3 keys into the College Navigator to filter it. And you can see here, you can set your search options here on the left. You can select majors that are available, etc. Some things I learned, just a small side note, because I just did this with my daughter. She's interested in game design, interactive media and game design is the major that she's interested in. So there's not a ton of those programs, but I learned that there are some colleges are missing because it takes a year or 2 for the data to get populated in the College Navigator. So there was a program like Clark University, for example, picked up Becker College's game design program when Becker College closed. That's not, and still may not be reflected in the College Navigator. I haven't checked recently, but when I checked initially, it didn't show up there. UConn didn't show up as having a program either, even though it fit the other criteria. So all this to say, this is not a perfect tool. There still might be your knowledge of colleges and what you know about programs and doing college tours and things like that are still critically important for students and families because these tools are not perfect. They're only as good as the information that's fed into them. But again, that said, back to the original programming, you can use this to filter relatively quickly, set those obtuse criteria that you use in the initial list phase to get an initial list of colleges to explore a little bit more deeply, right? So you'll notice something that's not included here is that we don't include cost or financial match here at this stage of the process. And that's because as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you know of a resource that does this, there's no way to filter colleges using this data anyway by net price. You can only filter colleges by list price. And as we'll see a little bit later in the presentation, and as you likely know, a college's sticker price or list price is often very different than the actual price or the net price that students actually pay. So you might miss some really good options for you or your students, or a family might miss a really good option if they try to filter colleges by the sticker price. And that's the only way that I know of. I don't know of any tools available that have the data to sort colleges by net price. So that's the list phase, right? So in the explore phase, the next phase, we're going to use all 6 keys of college fit. So we're going to look at these aspects of the first 3 keys that we already talked about in terms of academic match. We're going to start thinking about chances of admission at this point, with GPA and what's their overall selectivity and things like that. We're going to look more closely at the career match side of things to see if they have the kinds of programs and services that might really help us grow and develop. And then we're going to look at some different aspects of personal match as well. And then we're going to add to that the other parts of the other 3 keys that weren't considered in the list phase. So here in the explore phase is when we do begin to look at financial match, because instead of trying to look through tens, dozens, or hundreds of colleges, given what may have popped up for you in that initial list search, now you can start looking at those fewer colleges, the smaller list, if you will, the curated list of colleges a little bit more closely. You can get information on the sticker price through the College Navigator, and how much gift aid is typically awarded by a college. So that stuff is available here. In student support, you're going to look at what kinds of programs and services are available to ensure that your needs can be met on each of those college campuses. And then you're going to look at student outcomes, things like graduation rates and retention rates. So the goal of this phase is really to narrow your list from the 10 or 15 or so to the 8 or 12 colleges. You're really starting to narrow it down to those places that you're really strongly considering applying to. All right, so here also in this phase, in the explore phase, to help us estimate our chances of admission, I don't know how many people here use the common data set, or the CDS, as we commonly refer to it as, but the common data set is a voluntary data sharing initiative that colleges can choose to participate in. And when they do choose to participate in that, they can provide some information that's really helpful for students and families in determining I guess their chances of admission in particular. So, so as you know, if you're familiar with the common data set, they present this information on what's called in section C7, basis for selection, the relative importance of factors in admissions decisions. So here you can look at the academic and the non-academic factors that the college says they consider, and how important they are to them. So we can see here, this is actually UMass Amherst, not trying to hide anything. This is the most recent common data set. I just pulled this up yesterday. And this says that all of the academic factors except for standardized test scores are important, and standardized test scores since COVID at UMass Amherst are considered if they're submitted. But everything else is important or very important. With the non-academic factors, the one I like to focus in on here is the one that's at the very bottom. That's level of applicant interest. At UMass Amherst, they've recently stopped considering, or saying that they stopped considering demonstrated interest. I hope we're all familiar with what demonstrated interest is. Demonstrated interest is when a student signs up for an email list, or goes and visits the college campus, or interacts with somebody in admissions, or follows them on social media. Like, those are all ways that a student can demonstrate interest in a college. And a lot of students and families don't know that demonstrating interest is a factor that some colleges use when they make admissions decisions about whether or not to admit you. Okay, so that's something, particularly our first generation students, they're just not aware that non-academic factors are things that colleges pay attention to, right? And in particular, that demonstrated interest one. So demonstrated interest, when we look at up at the top here, we have malleable non-academic factors and less malleable non-academic factors. Demonstrated interest is one of the more malleable things that we can do to improve a student or family's chance of admission, right? If you don't live too far away from the college, it's relatively easy to schedule a visit. And some colleges are tracking that information and using that information to know whether they should admit you or whether they should reject you because they think that you're their safety school, for example, right? So, so this provides some really helpful information. So we can see here, interviews are not something that's considered at UMass Amherst. They just don't do them. Extracurricular activities are considered important. State residency is actually considered here, which is somewhat interesting if you're an out-of-state student. But geographical residence is not considered. So that's part of the country, I believe. So all of this stuff can be really helpful information for helping students and families estimate their chances of admission and improve their chances of admission at a college. Mandy, do you have anything else to add to this before I go on to the next one?
No, I mean, I think one of the things that's important in the explore phase, and you'll find when we talk about the college data organizer, is some of the information is really easy to find, right? So some of it's just, it's data, right? When you look at outcomes or, percentiles for acceptance of, ACT, SAT, things like that. But what gets really difficult is, and we really encourage, is that exploration. Like when you're exploring, you're really exploring, you're talking to admissions, you're doing your research, you're diving a little bit deeper. You're going in and you're doing a college visit. And so the whole time during Explore, we really want students to interact with this information. So again, that 6 keys of college fit is really the foundation to now then go explore. Like, these are the questions you should go ask. This is what you need to do. So as they start bringing in that information, they're just more informed throughout that entire process. That's the only thing.
Yep. So if you're not familiar with the Common Data Set, just really quickly, it's not a single place or a repository for this information. To find a college's Common Data Set information, just Google the college with the name, Google the college's name with the words Common Data Set. And often Google will auto-populate it and you'll be brought to the page where they provide this information. But each college hosts this information on their own website if they participate. And if the college doesn't participate, I would encourage you to, if it's a college that a lot of your students go to, like reach out to admissions and see if they can give you any insight into how important these various things are. I don't think that admission counselors will try to hide anything, but the demonstrated interest one is particularly important. So again, it's always worth having that relationship with, as a counselor with the colleges to get this kind of information, but feel free to ask them if they don't participate. And generally speaking, it tends to be the public colleges and more selective colleges tend to participate in the Common Data Set, and the less selective colleges tend to not participate in the Common Data Set as a general rule, but there's exceptions on both of those ends of the spectrum. So here's some information from the College Navigator. This is if you drill down into the financial aid section for a particular college. This college will remain unnamed for the time being, but I want to hone in here on a couple of things. So here at this college, it's a college in Massachusetts, 97% of the students get an institutional grant or scholarship, or in other words, merit money. Or as I learned when I attended the NACAC conference, the colleges call this the discount. So really, the question, if you're applying to this college or if you're supporting a student family who's applying to this college, the question isn't how do you get a scholarship? The question is how do you end up in the 3% who don't get that scholarship? And the answer is typically that those are international students, actually. But here, the average merit award at this college is $40,000 of the 97% of students that got it. The average was $40,000. That means that about half the students got more than that and about half the students got less than that. But that's a significant discount. In fact, I did the math. It's a 67% discount off the sticker price. So this is why, if this is a college that has the program that you're looking for and it's in the right location, all those other things work for you. If you were just looking at price in the initial list phase, you would have missed this college, even though it's the listed sticker price is $60,000. You get $40,000 off that, 67% off, right? So helping students and families understand that and how to find this information can be really, really helpful. So you may remember, last year, in 2022, LaSalle College made news. I know I heard about this first on the local news here in the Boston area. That LaSalle University announced their plans to reduce tuition and room and board costs by 33%, right? They were cutting their costs by a third. And I applaud them for doing this. Their goal was actually to provide more transparency to students and families because, and I'll give you the cliff notes here, according to research conducted by Sally May, 60% of high school students wouldn't consider a college or university even if it met their other criteria if the published sticker price was deemed beyond their means. So LaSalle said, you know what? We're going to lower our sticker price. We're going to reduce the discount, therefore, or put the discount up front to everybody. Since at LaSalle, it was one of those places that gave every student a significant discount. I actually went and looked at their information the year that they did this, and the actual average discount, if you look here on the lower left, was 38%. So they lowered their tuition by 33%. They used to give a 38% discount, a $22,000 scholarship. So where did that other 5% go? That's the cynic in me, perhaps. But the optimist in me thinks that LaSalle is going to use that other 5% of the money for things like need-based aid as opposed to merit-based aid. So again, this information is there, but again, I applaud LaSalle for being more transparent. I wish more private colleges that had a system that works like this did this, but the fact is that nobody ever paid the full price. At LaSalle, 100% of the students got a $22,000 scholarship on average. So by lowering their tuition, lowering their sticker price, they were just being more transparent and not giving them as large or any award letter. Merit award, if you will. All right. So the better way to approach things, you can look at the gift aid, but you can also look at the net price. This information is in the net price section of the College Navigator. It's right under the financial aid section. So this says that after all aids given, federal aid in addition to institutional aid, here's the actual amount that students actually pay, and it's broken up by income level. This is for UMass Amherst, I believe. Yep, this is for UMass Amherst. And you can see here the average net price for all students who attend UMass Amherst was $22,291. That includes living expenses, cost of books, all of that stuff. But you can see if you're a low-income student, you're paying closer to $11,000, but higher income students are paying closer to $30,000, right? This information is there, publicly available. It helps you assess the affordability of colleges before you submit your application, okay? Which is why we have it here in the Explore section.
And I'll say this past fall, so my daughter's a junior, so we were doing a mad dash of college tours up in Boston area. So I was privileged to go see Tim and Rich and meet up with them. And so they definitely showed me all their different colleges that were around the Boston area, which is, like you said, outstanding. And it was interesting. So we looked at Amherst College and UMass Amherst when we were visiting. And again, being an out-of-state student is very different than being an in-state student. And when we did the calculations between an Amherst and a UMass Amherst, we actually got more aid because it's a private institution and everybody pays the same and there are discounts and so forth. And so it was really interesting as, a parent going through that, and that's why in-state works really well for if you're in state, and if you're out of state, it's a different formula. So really talking families through that, I think is just so critical. So this is one of my favorite things to show families, because I think that, again, as Tim has mentioned again and again, they really don't understand that cost of attendance versus net price. And it's such a big part of the decision that they're not truly informed if they don't have this piece of information. So really important. And to make it easy, I think the next one is I will say that Tim is kind of our Excel guru, and he does a great job at all the things that he does. And he's like, I think we could kind of build a better mousetrap, right? And so when we look at the College Navigator and Big Future and some of the search sites out there, we're like, how do we really compare some of this data that is coming through iPads, and how do we have families make sense of what they should be looking for, and then how to sort of know where to ask questions when they do that explore phase. And so Tim had a great idea to create what we call the College Data Organizer. It is a free download. Anybody can do this. If you just go to collegeandmaze.com/downloads, you will have it. Again, I can email it to you if you have any questions. It's an Excel sheet. And one of the things that we have done is we've looked at, as you saw with the 6 keys of college fit, and we've defined what are some of the characteristics of each of the keys. So we've taken the specific data that students and families should be looking at through iPads, and that comes through, and we've put it in one handy chart. And so this is all broken out by the 6 keys. So you will see an academic match section, you'll see a financial match, you'll see student outcomes, and so forth. Now, some of the information does need to be inputted, right? Because it's sort of it's subjective, right? You have to go in and you have to visit and say, oh, how are your alumni services, or how are your career services? So some things we put as a rating scale, right? Once they go visit, they ask these questions, they come back and they complete that answer. Some of it will auto populate because it's just statistics. What you'll see here is we've chosen 5 schools. We entered the 5 names of the universities, and on our sheet you actually can go up to 12. And based on the information, it automatically, the list that you have will, there you go, will highlight it. So if you put in a school, I don't know, just pick one, you'll see that green and the yellow and the white. So green is beneficial to the student. So maybe that's a cheaper price, maybe that's an easier admission criteria, maybe it's, they accept more students, but typically green benefits a student in getting into that school, or how much they're going to pay, or lower higher graduation rates, and so forth. And then the white is in the middle, And then the yellow is just sort of cautionary. So it's the lower school. So maybe, and not lower school in the sense that maybe it's more selective. Maybe it only has a 10% acceptance rate versus another school has an 80% acceptance rate. And so it's just something to look out for. Now you can actually remove the color code, but we see a lot of families, when you start seeing some of the statistics and you look compares. So for example, he put the College of St. Rose, and one of the things that I kind of noticed right away, that if I'm looking at University of Wyoming and it's green, it's going to be the cheapest price for all, incomes, where College of St. Rose, it's going to be one of the more expensive. You can compare, but yet St. Rose, 99% of students receive aid. So it's a really great tool to kind of go through and walk through families. Now, just click on the CDS tab, Tim. So if you notice at the bottom of this, we've been talking about the CDS and the things that are considered as very important, considered. So if you type in and you look that up and you type in if it's a 3 because it was very important for that school, or a 2, you'll start seeing some color coding. And what's nice is you can now kind of look for patterns. So if this is my college list, what are kind of most important? If you're looking at essays are really important, then you want to maybe make sure with that student that they really understand how to write a good application and a good essay, and what does that entail. If it's just GPA and transcripts and ACT, SAT scores, then they understand that, right? Maybe you don't need to do as much. And then the last tab, the charts, is one of my favorite tabs. It just kind of puts things in perspectives and, kind of compares it in a little bit different way. But if you scroll down, there's a really great, as I know that we were just kind of filling stuff in, but it'll put in the 25th to 75th percentile of the school. So if the student does put in their ACT, SAT score, you'll be able to kind of see where they're at. And on the CDO, and we're always updating this. I know Tim and I were just talking right before we got on that the IPEDS data is now out, and we'll be updating that. It takes a little while because we're literally got 10,000 and 10,000 plus. I don't even know how many lines of data is behind here, but we'll update it. And one of the new pieces that came out was percentage of students who enrolled in the college, how many of them actually submitted ACT, SAT scores. So if you're having that test optional question, that's a good way to sort of answer where your score is at. Should you submit? Should you not submit? But that is now included on the academic match. There's a line for both ACT and for SAT where it says, yeah, percent submitting SAT scores. So Smith College, 34% submitted SAT, 20% submitted ACT. So we're talking about a 54% who ended up enrolling did submit scores. So a really useful chart, I think, just for families. And what's nice that I like about it is if your college list changes, you can just go ahead and update and put in new information. And again, it'll compare and contrast based on that student's list. So you're not comparing against a highly selective group versus, maybe a moderate selective group as well. So really cool. So again, just collegeonmaze.com/downloads to get that. So you'll see some of these specifics, again, just really trying to highlight some of those statistics that are important. Did you want to add anything to that, Tim?
No, we only have 10 minutes left.
Oh my goodness. All right. So the next phase is apply. I know. And be sure if you have any questions, I know in the Q&A, I've been kind of looking at it. You can, as we wrap up, we'll definitely give you some minutes at the end, or you can always email us as well. So in the apply chapter, we go through and we really walk students through the whole process. Before they apply, we want them, after they've explored, they've looked at everything, we want them to go back and reassess every college based on the 6 keys. What have they learned? So we actually walk them through a rating system of really, again, being diligent, focused, and going through and saying, does this school match who I am, what I'm looking for, and my specific criteria? And then that's who they apply to. So at the end, whatever schools that they are getting admission to, you should have a list of really good schools that have matched you on your sort of 6 keys of college fit. And it's one of the reasons why we don't necessarily like, the words like target school, match school, safety school. We like kind of talking it of your chance of admissions, but then also sort of what, and I think it should be on the next slide. On then yeah, so it's chance of admissions by your overall fit, because a lot of times when we go through safety, target, reach, is we're not actually there, we're missing the student part of that. Where are you actually at? And there might be a chance that a highly selective school is not a good overall fit. So we do something called the 3x3, where we're bringing in that information, like, based on my academic criteria and what the college is looking for, and what I'm looking for is that an actual connection. So we actually have them go through this 3x3 to really come out with the best schools for them to apply to. You want to go to the next one? So then with that, I'll just mention on the apply, we have an example essay, example resume, we have letters of recommendation. And so we do walk them through. We're not going to do it today, but we do walk them through the exact, application process, as well as the different types of applications, the different types of deadlines, early decision, early action, all that good stuff is all in there as well. The D, the decide, right, is now kind of this, as the information is coming in, did I get accepted? Did I get deferred? Did I get a summer admit? Did I get a spring admit? Like, once all this information starting to come in, now what we want to do is, obviously some schools they might not be getting into, so some we're going to remove from the equation, and others we're going to kind of go back. Now that we sort of have that answer of yes, we want to again reassess all of that information, because sometimes I had a student recently just reached out, and Georgia Tech just released their information, and he got into Georgia Tech, and he's an out-of-state student, 9% acceptance rate this go around, and he wasn't really expecting Georgia Tech was going to be an option. And now it's like, okay, what do I do with Georgia Tech? I thought it was going to be a reach school for me, and maybe I wouldn't have gotten in. And so now they have to reassess what their priorities are. And more importantly, as we were talking with Julie about financial aid, that award letter, and once, what does all that information, how do they bring that in, and then actually make a decision? And one of the things that we haven't mentioned, we talk a lot about within the entire College on Maze curriculum, the importance of your college support network, and how do you tap into your school counselor? How do you tap into your parents and your coaches and your mentors and your teachers? And the decide factor, stage is one of those that's when that college support network can give you some extra insight and information on what they think and what's going on and their personality and what might fit them best. So again, you really need to go back in, reassess, and look at, does the school match what I need? Tim?
Yeah.
Did you want to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would also just say here, so up to this point, making a list, exploring the colleges, and then submitting your applications, we kind of minimize the role of feelings in the decision-making process. But here in the decide phase, like here is where we're explicitly looking for folks to say, all right, now let's talk about how you feel about those places, in addition to considering all the facts as well. So.
Absolutely. And that's when we did our visits, and I'm sure, Tim, you ran into this when I went and did the visits up in Boston with my daughter. We went in the fall. It was beautiful. The leaves are falling. And my daughter was like in love with like everything, because I live in Florida and we just have palm trees and sunshine. And that's just her vibe, right? And I'm like, let's not fall in love yet. Let's fall in love once we get the decision back. And then you can bring in some of those more emotional, but let's not bring it into like, this is my number one choice, when it might be too expensive. It might not be the right school for you, So I was trying to let's not bring too many emotions in at the beginning stage. So then what we do is, like Tim says, is again, we want them to assess where they're at. So going back to that overall fit, the 6 keys of college fit, looking at every factor and every key very specifically, but then also really kind of rating their desirability. So kind of, do I see myself here? Does it have everything I want? Am I able to sort of have that college experience that I'm looking for, whatever that may be, and kind of bringing in that a little more of an emotional piece to it, and then really kind of taking out the things that maybe aren't going to fit you so well now that you've learned more about yourself and what you're interested in. And I'm sure, Tim, you and your daughter, the process is, it ebbs and flows, doesn't it? You learn so much about what she wants because she visited a college. Oh, and they have this, this, this. And now she's like, ooh, I actually really like this, this, and this. So what was maybe important, early on in the process, maybe not be as important now, or vice versa. So that's why we want them to go back to this 3x3 and bring in that information.
And it definitely changes over time.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely,
People change
definitely.
their mind, and yeah, we should
And you,
expect that.
and you got to let that happen, right? I think that that's really critical, is that process as a family. And then lastly, and I know Tim and I both mentioned this earlier on about the importance of the succeed, going back to that statistic of, a little about 50% of students are not going to be graduating on time. And I think as counselors, our job is definitely to help them find their post-secondary, plan and the college and what they're doing. But more importantly is we need to set them up for success. And we need to make sure that we can do what we can to make sure that they understand how to engage in the college process once they get there. And that's everything from understanding your financial stipulations. So how do you keep your FAFSA? How do you keep your scholarships? What are the requirements for that? How many students forget when to complete their FAFSA and that you have to do it every year? Or there's a lot of times, just because you're an FTIC student a first time in college, there's different scholarship amounts, and there might be additional scholarships and internships, that are paid after you get there. So tapping into that. We also want them to really look at and having an academic plan. How do you meet with your advisor? How are you going to use the tutoring services? How are you going to use your office hours? How are you going to really engage with the curriculum and the information and getting ready for your major and really making sure that you're on track so you're graduating on time? And lastly, we know that there's a social component to college, right? They're learning who they are and who they want to be. And so what does that look like? I know one of the things I wish I would have done was gotten involved sooner in the college process. I just didn't know all those things existed. I was a first generation kid and I just didn't know. Nobody told me about all the clubs and things, and I missed the club fair, I guess. So that social piece, right? And how are ways that you can tap into groups that support you, create the culture that you're looking for, and really making sure that, sort of socially, emotionally, you are taken care of throughout that process. So we walk them through really a very simple plan to kind of look at, okay, now that I'm going to this college, I've made a decision. What are the exact steps that I need to do along with my family? Because you need, again, that college support network to make sure that I am maximizing my time and everything that I'm doing. So I am successful in a college. Tim?
Yeah. So now we'll conclude with just a little bit. We both talked a little bit about, with College Unmazed, we're trying to make resources that are helpful to students, families, and counselors, and people working in schools, and schools is our primary target audience. So we got the printed, we got a workbook. We have a digital version of the workbook through Method Learning that's a lot more affordable for folks. Lots of stuff on our website for you to see. Something I worked on this past summer that we got a card sort activity that's helps students and families talk about what's important to them in the process. So we're developing some resources that we think can be really helpful to you all in doing the important work that you do. So yeah, without you have anything else to add to that, Amanda? Or
Well, I think Tim is kind of glossing over it, but the the card sort, it's how do you make, and it's specifically on the 6 keys of college fit, right? Is really that assessment piece and what's most important, and how do you sort of, as we talked about, it ebbs and flows, right? With what the importance, and so it's a great tool and activity that you can use with all of your students to really start again, having them really think through it and then seeing which keys sort of are the most important to them and which keys that they're sort of blind to. Like, for example, we know that there's a mental health crisis in our nation and our teens today. And the fact that families aren't asking about mental health services on a college campus is really shocking. And I know I had just sent Tim, there was a college that was talking about they had a high suicide rate for a while and what the college was doing in response to that. And it was like, families need to know that if I'm sending my kid to Boston and I'm literally thousands of miles away, that my student knows how to interact and ask these questions, because I want to make sure that they have all the resources to be successful.
And just along those lines, like for example, and it's one of the cards, but I think every college campus has access to mental health counseling, but do you get free visits a semester or is it unlimited? Like that's something that actually varies from college to college. So I've talked with some friends, extended family for whom having the counseling center and having it that was a big part of their decision was the fact that unlimited counseling was available. So.
Well, and how quickly, like I've heard there's a big university here in Florida, I won't mention names, but they have a month waiting list of getting in. And it's like, I'm sorry, if my students in a mental health crisis, like they can't wait a month, and then do I go pick them up? Like, what does that look like? And, or even like accommodations, 504, IEP, if you think that you're using your accommodations and all of a sudden magically you don't need them in college, it's going to be the reverse. You're going to need to advocate even a little bit more. And so I think that that's why, I'm so proud of just the curriculum in general and sort of how it helps counselors, is because it allows you to really hone in on those sort of questions for the students that it's really important, and that they're looking at all different aspects of the college process. So if you have any questions, I know we have a few minutes. We kind of hurried up through those last few slides to make sure we had enough time. We're not great on Facebook and Instagram, but you can definitely check us out. We try. You can get on our email list. We send out, Rich loves the blog, and so he sends out fun little the stories and different things to, again, how to work with students. And we have lots of free downloads and things like that. So definitely check out the website and connect with us. Julie, did we miss anything? Is there?
No, I just yeah, I'll put the call out for any last questions, and just say that every time I'm with the two of you, I think this is so clear and organized, and these resources are really, really terrific. So I'm so glad that we're able to share them and that people will be able to stay in touch with you and stay connected with you, or share this with others if other friends couldn't join this morning. But I don't have any questions, and that probably is because you're both so clear and organized in the way you present this information as well. So I just want to thank you. Thank you so much.
Definitely. No, thank you, Julie,
Thank
for all
you.
that you do and your organization. I love following it and seeing all the hard work that you do to really support Massachusetts and around the nation, right? So I was telling Julie earlier, somebody connected with me last year after this, and they were in Texas and was like, oh, I heard you on MEFA, and we got connected and working on a project together. So I know you're nation worldwide. So thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And again, thank you, and stay in touch, all of us. I love our community. Thank you.
All right. Take care,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.